Ambassador, did you advise the administration to greenlight, in essence, the Turkey's intentions, desires to invade in Syria?
I certainly did not, Senator, but nobody in the administration green-lighted the Turkish
So in
invasion.
December, when the president made the remarks that, well, indicated he wanted to get out, which caused the Senate to cast a vote to try to dissuade him, as well as colleagues, particularly on the Republican side, to speak to the president. Wasn't that already the beginning of the end? And then the decision. Were you consulted about the removal of troops as precipitously as they were?
The president then, in February, modified his decision and agreed that we would keep a residual force on. Furthermore, in December, when the president said he would withdraw ground troops from that area, he said he would continue to maintain them in Al-Tamf in the south of Syria, and that we would maintain air support over the
But that's all
region.
changed. He's talking about taking everybody out. Now he's maybe leaving a couple hundred about oil fields. So my question is, were you consulted about the withdrawal of troops as was recently done?
I personally was not consulted before the
not
December.
Consulted, even though you are the special envoy here in the context of Syria. Let me ask you this. Isn't it fair to say that the SDF has been a reliable partner in the fight against ISIS?
Absolutely, Senator.
Isn't it fair to say that we cannot achieve an enduring defeat of ISIS through air power alone and without some type of ground forces?
We need ground forces. They do not necessarily have to be American, Senator.
That's right. And this is exactly the point. It was the Kurds who were largely our ground forces. It's the Kurds that lost about 11,000 to 13,000 of their people. It's the Kurds that were detaining over 10,000 ISIS fighters and families for us. So it doesn't have to be us, but when you betray the person the entity who you were fighting on the battlefield with, and you basically leave them when you're finished using them and say, you're on your own, it's a hell of a way to send a global message that, in fact, don't fight for the United States, because when they're finished with you, they'll let you die on the battlefield. Isn't it true that U.S. troops would be at risk of significantly higher casualties in fighting a resurgent ISIS without SDF partners or some similar partner?
Absolutely, Senator.
Isn't it true that the SDF has now sought military and political protection from Bashar al-Assad's Russian and Iranian-backed government?
They have come to an agreement in certain areas to coordinate. That is true.
Isn't it true that we have a greater risk of creating a vacuum where Iran can ultimately position itself to build its long-sought land bridge to the Mediterranean, which is a threat to our ally, the State of Israel?
At this moment, we are looking at all of our political, military, and economic options to avoid just that, Senator, under this new circumstance.
Well, I don't know what our options are when we get out. We don't have any guarantee on airspace that we're going to be able to use airspace for any missions, whether it be anti-ISIS or defending our ally, the State of Israel. I don't know what guarantees we are. Isn't it fair to say that Iran is not an agent of Russia? Russia's not going to be able to tell Iran, thank you for fighting, get out now?
You're absolutely right. Iran and Russia have divergent interests in Syria. Unfortunately, both of them are allied against our interests in supporting Assad's.
Now, what is our counter in the midst of facing, according to the Department of Defense Inspector General, that there are still 14,000 to 18,000 ISIS fighters, despite this conversation consistently about ending the caliphate, and these other 10,000 that are detained, which if the Kurds have to just defend themselves, they're not going to be busy detaining ISIS fighters. That's potentially a 30,000 hardened force if they reconfigure it together. What is our plan to defeat them and to end that threat?
One, and it's, for the record, it's the SDF, which is about 50% Arab. It's the Arab-Kurdish coalition and the SDF that is still maintaining control over essentially all of those detainees, the 10,000 you mentioned, Senator. That's an accurate figure. The 14,000 to 18,000 are scattered in, if you look at the map, 3 areas. As you're looking at it, Iraq, particularly the Sunni Arab areas, the northeast that we're talking about today, and the rest of Syria, more or less under the control of either the Syrian government or the Turks in the northwest. In those Assad-controlled areas of Syria, ISIS is running amok without much control. We do some airstrikes into there, but it's not really an area we can have a whole lot of action on, other than to monitor it and, as I said, strike when we have a good target. In the northeast, that's the area that we're focused on. We're going to continue to work with the SDF. That's our plan. The SDF leader, Commander Mazloum, has committed to us that he wants to continue working with us, and that's what we're looking at, the options that I mentioned earlier right now, urgently for. And in Iraq, we're continuing to work with the Iraqi government and with a coalition of some 20 or 30 nations from around the world to keep ISIS under control there. So that's the plan.
Ambassador, I have a deep, deep respect for your service, and you're dealt a hand you're dealt with, and that's what you do as a career person. But let me just say, you know, they're running amok under the Assad control area. We still have the expectation that the SDF, as they fight for their lives, is going to be fighting ISIS for us. It's an incredible expectation. And in Iraq, the forces that we are transferring out of Syria there, we're being told by the Iraqis they're not going to be able to stay. So I do not see a strategy or a plan that will make sure that the homeland is secure against a potential of a resurgence of ISIS that is a threat to the national interest and security of the United States. And I hope to see it, but I don't see it as of now, which is why we have asked, we think it's only fair that all members get a briefing from the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, and the CIA director about the dynamics of this, and we can't seem to get a briefing. Something is wrong when we have such a major national security interest and members of the United States Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, cannot get a hearing. I hope you send the message back to the administration. That's not acceptable.
Yes, sir.